The Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game releases on August 18th, and it has the opportunity to change horror video games forever. Now, video games based on horror movies isn't exactly a new concept. You've been able to play as your favorite serial killer since the early 80s. From the Atari to the Nintendo Entertainment System, all the way up to the PS5. There's been plenty of licensed games from some of the biggest and some not so big horror franchises. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, The Evil Dead, The Thing, Jaws, Fright Night, Nightbreed, Saw, and even Pumpkinhead have all gotten video games. And while the quality of these older games may vary, most of them were pretty much single-player affairs. It seems that times have shifted now with the advent of the internet, as the new trend has been the asymmetric multiplayer horror game. Arguably starting with Evolve, an early game for the PS4 and Xbox One that deals with one giant kaiju versus 4 trained military hunters, the horror genre quickly adapted this formula. Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th made the trend profitable and repeatable. Licensed horror games based on movies or characters were popular yet again, and they were able to reach a whole new audience. Both games were on top of the world, and then the Friday the 13th lawsuit ruined it all. The original right holders basically fought over who owned what of the Friday the 13th franchise, and that game basically died. Well, from the ashes rose the phoenix. In the death of the Friday the 13th game, many more games popped up and tried to take its place. The Evil Dead, Puppet Master, Killer Klowns, and now the Texas Chainsaw Massacre all have similar formulas and are ready to take the world by storm. Arguably, the most important out of all of these is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game. This new game will be published by the same people that released the Friday the 13th game, Gun Media. It only makes sense that they should be the ones to reclaim their crown. But the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre game is so much more important than just that. You see, this new game has the opportunity to change horror video games forever. After all, our journey through horror movie video game history all started with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's right, we wouldn't be here where we are today without it. The first licensed horror video game of all time was in fact the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the Atari 2600 back in 1983. Talk about influential. Look at how much has changed in the last 40 years, and we all have the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre game to thank for all of it. Will this new game write the same kind of historic story, or will this be another cash grab attempt to catch lightning in a bottle with a popular IP? Only time will tell, but I'm excited to find out. I can't wait to play this one with my friends, and here's to hoping that it works out for all of us horror fans. Now, before the game comes out, I want to re-watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974 so I can fully appreciate the new game and all the little hidden details. So join me, won't you, as I dive into one of the most influential horror movies of all time. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. While I love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its entire franchise, it's not one that I revisit very often. In fact, I've never revisited this one. I saw the original once when I was in high school, and let's just say it's been at least a decade and a half since I've last seen it. I remember being super excited to watch it in high school while I was first getting into horror, and I also remember that I didn't love it. At the time, I thought older movies like Psycho, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street all held up and were still really scary, but the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't frighten me at all. I had unreasonably high expectations going in, but they were not met at the time. Just because I didn't like TCM doesn't mean I'm any less of a horror fan. It's just embarrassing, I know. So needless to say, now that I'm a little bit more seasoned, I'm excited to give it another shot and really dive into this one with a little more tempered expectations. Grave robbings have been going on in a small Texas town, and a few friends drive to the remote town to check on their deceased family to make sure their graves haven't been touched. The friends try to refuel, but unfortunately the gas station is out of gas, and the gang have to wait until the afternoon before more is delivered. While they wait, they decide to go to the family's old house. Well, the neighbors have some dark secrets, and one by one they all get picked off. Everyone knows this movie, or at least should. It's one of the most well-regarded horror films of all time, so I'm not gonna sit here and walk you through every little detail of the plot. You know it all, and if you do want a rundown, basically every other horror YouTuber on the planet has covered this one. So instead of walking you through the plot, let's talk about some things that stand out. There will be major spoilers ahead, I am not holding back. The thing that I remember hating the most as a kid was Franklin and his terrible acting. I couldn't stand him, and honestly, not too much has changed. I was at least able to tolerate him this time around.
Something made him mad. Hey! If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it.
Never mind. This guy sucks. Another thing that I hated as a kid was the fact that Leatherface wasn't a slasher villain. I could have sworn he was. Everyone talked about him in the same breath as Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and even Freddy Krueger, so that was my expectation going in. I thought I was going to get more slashing and more stalking scenes, so I was disappointed. I thought I was going to get a more constant threat like most of the slasher villains of the 80s, but instead, I got a different kind of horror. The horror of the human condition, the depravity of man. I didn't understand it as a kid, but it hits differently as an adult. This time around, I really enjoyed how unique this one feels. It was unique in 1974, but it even feels refreshing by today's standards. This one has aged like fine wine. It gets better with time. This movie is beautiful. Seriously, it's stunning. The best part is that every time that something horrific and gut-wrenching happens, it is always followed with a beautiful shot. Like the first kill, which is still really strong. And then it follows up with this beautiful dolly tracking shot that goes under the swing and follows her to the house. It's one of my favorite shots in film history. You get other examples like this too. Let's talk more about how beautiful this movie is. These shots are stunning, and I love how the sun, heat, and location all play a big role in the beauty of it. It all feels so warm, sticky, and tangible. The ending, with a close-up of the eyes, makes the whole thing claustrophobic and intense. Such a mood is established with just the use of the camera. I do have a little nitpick complaint during just one scene. Once it becomes dark in the movie and Sally pushes her brother Franklin, the first few shots of them are way underlit. It's just a little too dark. Eventually, blue lights start to kick in and everything is lit well enough again, so it's not too bad. The sound design is also stellar. There's not a lot in the way of music, but the droning industrial sounds and the camera shutter sound effect are bone-chilling and effective. So good.
Oil storage units continue to burn out of control at the huge Texaco refinery near the Texas-Louisiana border.
While watching the movie this time around, I came to a realization, and I'm sure a million people have already thought of this, but Leatherface is the freaking victim of the movie. He's just at home, chilling, and people keep breaking into his house. Now, if you lived in the middle of nowhere and someone snuck into your own home, are you telling me that you're not making rash decisions either? Home invasion is no joke, folks. After the third one, he's looking out the window, wondering where all these kids are coming from. It looks like it's stressing him out. Is this a planned attack on his home? I love it. Most of his kills are out of self-defense, except for Franklin. He goes out of his way to kill Franklin, but let's be honest, if Leatherface wasn't going to kill Franklin, someone else would have. Leatherface became a national hero and a fan favorite by killing off Franklin. You know, there are a lot of shocking moments in this one. You have the hitchhiker freakout, the reveal of Leatherface, the cook turning on Sally, the relationship between the cook, the hitchhiker, and Leatherface. This must have been intense and stress-inducing for first-time viewers in 1974. The most shocking scene is probably the dinner scene. This is straight from a nightmare from hell. This scene is so uncomfortable to watch, and it was also very uncomfortable to film. This scene is notorious for how long it took to make. Instead of filming over the course of a few days, they had to get the whole scene filmed within 1 day of shooting. And why is that? You see, the cook, played by Jim Sedow, was only on contract for a week and his time was running out, so they had to film it before he left production. But there was also another reason. They were on their last grandpa mask, which is just a front prosthetic glued to the actor's face with a painted bald cap. There was no time to make another one, so they glued it to the actor's face, and he had to wear it until the day of shooting was finished. Well, a typical day on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre set was between 12 to 14 hours. This day was significantly worse. It was roughly 26 hours of straight filming. Some even claim that it was more than that.
Almost 36 hours straight we shot.
I'm sure Toby's got it up past 40 by now.
Dang, that's crazy. And to make matters even worse, this was a Texas summer. They had to black out the windows with blankets, and then you factor in the hot lights. Actors claim that it was between 130 and 150 degrees on set. Some of the crew was puking from the heat. That's all terrible, but the worst is what happened to the set design. They thought it would be a good idea to dress the set with dead animal parts throughout the house to give it more of an authentic vibe, and it all looked so good. But if you leave meat out in the heat for hours and hours, it begins to rot. The set stank. Sounds like a miserable time, and speaking of miserable, the actors weren't acting. Conditions were tough, and their torture was beautifully captured. So yeah, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre holds up better today than I ever thought it could. It really stood out back in the 70s, and even more so now. Even the sequels and the remake lose sight of what made the original so good and unique. I love the sequels and the remake, but they definitely feel more like slashers, or they dove too far into the human madness parts. And maybe that's why they always felt a little off to me. I am now super excited to play the game and see all the little added details. It's poetic in a way. The original game was the first horror movie licensed video game and was just as groundbreaking as the actual film was. Now this new game has an opportunity to change the horror gaming landscape forever, and hopefully bring the horror community together in a way we never thought imaginable. Here's the hoping. And that's all I have for tonight. So thank you so much for watching, and stay spooky, everyone. Thank you so much for watching until the end of the video. If you like what I do and want to support the channel, please consider subscribing by buying me a coffee in the description below. Are you getting the game? What's your favorite horror video game? I'd love to know in the comments below. Thanks.